When I was a kid, I was introduced to the dinosaur Spinosaurus through the Big Golden Book of Dinosaurs, which came out in 1988, written by Mary Etling and illustrated by Christopher Santoro. In it, you find a Spinosaurus chasing a Tyrannosaurus. For most of you out there, you were most likely introduced to Spinosaurus when Jurassic Park 3 came out in 2001. When this movie came out, Spinosaurus got the spotlight, which led to more people asking about this animal, which leads to more research, which brings us to this book I'm reviewing here.
And the book we're going to cover is Spinosaur Tales, The Biology and Ecology of Spinosaurus. It's not just Spinosaurus aegypticus, it's all its relatives related to it. And the authors of this book is David Hone and Mark P. Witton, which I covered books that they did before. David Hone did the Tyrannosaur Chronicles, which is, so this book is in a similar format of this. This covers the history and and the relationship with T-Rex and all of its relatives. So if you read this one or know about it, and it's a similar format here with Spinosaurus. Even the same publisher, Bloomsbury Sigma. So, but for Mark P. Witton, I covered his book on pterosaurs. So this is a book where not only Witton written, but he also did all the illustrations. He's an accomplished paleo artist, So he did all the art, most of the artwork in here, including some awesome center plates in the middle here. So a couple of them, like this one right here. Wonderful stuff there. Various, what have you. Okay, so with this book, this is a perfect beginner for those who are interested in Spinosaurus, hasn't had the time or to find the research papers and read into that. There's a bibliography in this, so you can have your list and to read into those details. But let's just say you're not very good in reading that, the technical stuff or any way form. This is a great book to help you catch up for the regular lay person. They'll teach you the terminologies necessary to follow along. They go through, each chapter goes through, of course, the introduction, but he also discusses the history and the species and relationships of the Spinosaurus family. So the history, they talk about what they found so far. Spinosaurus was not the first one. The first one that the family found was probably a tooth that they called Suchosaurus back in the 1840s, as looked into by Gideon Mantell. For those of you who know, Gideon Mantell was the one who discovered Iguanodon. And we found remains in Algeria in the 1890s and early 1900s. That's when Stromer discovered Spinosaurus aegypticus. Baryonyx in England in the 1980s, huge deal back then. We found in the 90s, we found Irritator in Brazil and Suchomimus, Niger. And of course, for those of you whoever got introduced to Spinosaurus, it was most likely through Jurassic Park 3. That's where it got in the spotlight, as I said before. And of course, with that interest, the book will tell you, because people are interested in this dinosaur, because the movie presented as capable of killing off T-Rex, but neat as love it or hate that, it brought it to the spotlight, and of course you are now curious, what do we know about this animal? And of course that drove further research, which we did. So that's when we found, unfortunately the original fossils, for those who don't know, were destroyed back in World War II. Stromer found them, in the early 1900s, and the hassle he had to take him, with the delays of getting back to Germany. World War II happened, so not only could he not go further back, when the Allies bombed Berlin, it bombed the museum, and the fossils were destroyed. He tried to get him to safety, but he was denied by the officers there. But after that, we went further. We found further remains. Unfortunately, not complete skeletons, which we'll get into that. But we talk about the fossil record. There's chapters covering the anatomy of Spinosaurus. We cover the head. One chapter covers the body and limbs, and one covers the life appearances. It talks about the anatomy, the spines, all the functions and all that. Very good chapter, especially if you're a paleo artist. Keep in mind. The next chapter deals with posture and locomotion. Now that's the one if you're interested in how well it can swim or how well it can't swim. That's the chapter you want to look into. Another chapter deals with the feeding, one on ecology, one about the life of Spinosaurus. Best we can tell from birth to death. And of course, the final chapter, the fascination and frustration of Spinosaurus. Now, as fascinating as we are about this, and as much as we know about these, a lot of what we know is based on, very little remains of each species that we have. Spinosaurus especially is done, we don't never had a full skeleton. A lot of it can be combined through relatives to help complete the picture or conjecture the best that we can. And the book explains on that. So if you now that may ruin what you may find fascinating, because you may love the idea that science has presented a form of Spinosaurus that can able to dive into the water, for at least a time like a crocodile and swims very well. But the book covers why that is a bit more difficult than what it is. It's not always about the rule of cool for us. It's about trying to understand the best we can of what these animals and their world was like. So take that back, and you can adjust it. It can still be it's still a cool animal of itself and all its relatives. It's a unique design compared to other theropods. I mean, the shape of its mouth alone is neat. But with that said, if you're interested in Spinosaurus, get this. Catch yourself up on that, and again, with a bibliography in the back, you could probably look into research papers and the books involved, and get into detail where the book only covers it before. And even since this book came out in 2025, you could use as a starting point to go into further research like this one.
So after you finish reading Spinosaur Tale, you can find this issue of Science Magazine, February 12th, as far as February 19th of 2026, where we are introduced to a brand new species of Spinosaurus. The scimitar crested Spinosaurus species from Subheracaps stepwise Spinosaur radiation by Paul Sereno et al. He's written a lot of stuff about Spinosaurus, usually in opposition to what we're popularizing it as. But that's how science works. So we are introduced to a new species of Spinosaurus where, while we have not found a full skeleton as usual, what we have found makes it very interesting. This species has a nice little scimitar crest on its head, similar to some birds like cassowaries and such like that. We don't find much evidence of that on Spinosaurus aegypticus like the one down below. So we get to compare. I have not read this one thoroughly, so what they present here can still ask questions. Whether this is sexual dimorphisms. These two live in the same area roughly at the same time, if I understand it. I could be wrong, but we could look over here, find more what we have. What we have in the blue is what was discovered. So in this picture, you can see, the upper and lower jaw with the scimitar crest, some bits of vertebrae down here. Some of the back one, was beginning of the long, tall spine that Spinosaurus are known for. And, some of the leg bone here, some toe bones and all that. So, so it starts with it goes into very heavy detail of all that was found, and not just of the bones itself. They explore evolution of spinosaurids, and also later on, you get all the measurements, and with the supplements after that, you can look over some of the field notes that they have and how it was found, and later on, now this was found in Niger. And later on, we can find the taxonomic phylogenetic relationship right here at near the tail end of all this. So this is for those who have never read scientific papers before, this could be a little heavy. But I think that after you read Spinosaur Tales, you can start on this and get what you can, even if you don't get all the details.
On a side note here, one of the books I've done just a couple of years ago was The Desert Bones by, never could get the name right, Jamal Ejouher. Now, this does mention Spinosaurus in it, but more importantly, this book talks about North Africa and the Cenomania period, which is about 100 million years to 95 million years. So it's the beginning of the second half of the Cretaceous period. So this is a good book that complements this. So if you want to talk about the environment that Spinosaurus aegyptus existed in, which is also the same environment that Marillibus in. So you might compare the notes here and see what you can conjecture off of that, or what they could find later on. With that said, one of the things I found about the book itself, I got it from Amazon, and when I picked it up, it is lightweight. I'm so used to the density of other books, especially from Indiana Press, so that surprised me. However, fair warning, this is the same publishing company that did the Tyrannosaurus Chronicles that Hone did. But as I was reading this, and I haven't that long, it's starting to. This is a yellow book, but it starts, and I don't know if I can show it here. As I was holding it on the bottom here, the yellow started to wear off away about this. You can see it more so right here. That was just because I was holding the book like this and just rubbing it was, causing the yellow to go away. I don't know what happened here, but fair warning about that. It got a little water damage on my copy, but it has nothing to do with the delivery from Amazon. I was reading this at the beginning of July, and Oklahoma, for those of you who don't know, we had a nice little windstorm on the 4th of July. Our fireworks show got canceled because of some lightning storm started coming in. And so it most likely would have brought a little rain, would have interrupted things, but it was more than just a little rain here. This was 90-mile-per-hour wind, and I was facing it dead on. I didn't wrap my book in plastic before I put it in my bag coming home from work, so it got a touch water damage on that. So I'm going to give you another copy, but as a fair warning, this is not the... you want to be careful with this. I mean, for those of you who may have... if you want to contact Bloomsbury Sigma, and say, hey, the cover is kind of, wears out quickly there, it might fix that in the future. But... with that said, if you are a Spinosaurus fan or just want to know about Spinosaurus and you want a book that gives you a good start on everything you probably want to know, then for the regular layperson in decent detail, this is the book to do it. And from there, you can look at the bibliography and the resources in the back to extend further. In fact, I found a English translation of Stromer, who discovered Spinosaurus aegypticus. His specimen was destroyed, but all we have in detail is the monograph that he did. I found an English edition of that. So you can check your university, check up Google Scholar, or if you need to go beyond that, check your library. Hopefully you've survived that. And of course, after that, you can go to the science issue that I just showed up there. That's Science, February 19, 2026. So about Spinosaurus mirabilis. If you want to continue on further research of that. By the time I'm recording this, the big news right now is the new juvenile T-Rex that we just discovered. Which is important, but I'm sure it'll interfere with the views here. But I digress. Spinosaur Tales by David Hone and Mark P. Witton. There you go. Thank you all for watching. You have a nice day.